Welcome back inside the den. Glad to have everyone back for this jam-packed episode. I know it feels like the sky is falling given this recent game. We're here to discuss it all, and with me, as always, is Chris Murray. Nevada football drops a tough one against Idaho.
Yeah, I mean, you can't lose games like that. I mean, you, I guess, can lose the FCS opponents, but not get blown out and look totally outclassed, which is what happened as Idaho beat Nevada 33-6. I think the first kind of news of this might not go well for Nevada was when the betting line was released Saturday morning, and Idaho was a 4-point favorite. Quickly bet up to 6 points, and then once they got on the field, Idaho scores a 75-yard touchdown on their first offensive play, and I think it just snowballed from there. Coach Wilson has talked about how his team is still a little bit fragile. I don't know that the belief is there that if they do face adversity in games, they'll be able to come out and fight back. And certainly after that first play, things didn't go very well. They did get a takeaway on its second defensive play, but Nevada had to punt even though they were in Idaho territory. So from start to finish, that was just a rough game for Nevada, and certainly I think that was the breaking point for a lot of Wolfpack fans out there. When you look at a lot of the comments on social media or via email or just the general fan belief in this program and this tenure under Ken Wilson, felt like it hit a turning point there. Nevada has 10 games to turn it back in its favor, but losing to Idaho, a program you've dominated this entire century at home in such lopsided fashion, is not how Nevada really wanted to start the home schedule.
Certainly, I mean it's definitely. It feels like rock bottom for Nevada football. You look at outlets like the USA Today and these other platforms, and they release their weekly rankings from 1 to 133 for the FBS. Nevada currently sits at 133, so they've been determined to be the worst FBS team in college football. However, the seasons change, and you never know if they can turn it around and start winning again. But I think that kind of points to a trend within college football that FCS schools are starting to beat these bottom tier FBS schools. You look around the country on Saturday, it's a storyline, right? Because go to Virginia, and a typical ACC middle of the road team, but it's still a Power 5 team. They lost to James Madison, and then you go back up to Eastern Washington, and they gave. Who was it? Fresno State, quite
Fresno
the
State
game.
Double overtime. James Madison actually is in FBS now, but there were 3 FCS teams that beat FBS teams in week 2. The other 2 losses outside of Nevada were 3-point losses, not 27-point loss, which is a little bit different of a story. In week 1, the FCS was 0-42 against the FBS. So Idaho's a really good team. I mean, they've got a really good quarterback. They've got 2 really good wide receivers. They've got a really good running back. We knew their skill positions were going to be strong. I think if you're a Wolfpack fan, maybe a little bit more alarming that in the trenches it felt like you lost that battle too. And Idaho starts 1 freshman, 3 sophomores, and a junior on the offensive line. They are also in the second year under their head coach, Jason Eck. So they were in a similar kind of rebuilding situation. They've obviously rebuilt that thing a lot quicker than Nevada has been able to do so. So like you said, 10 games left. Nevada does have a lot of winnable games left on their schedule. New Mexico, Colorado State, UNLV, maybe even Utah State. There are some potential wins out there. But Nevada just needs to play much, much better. And if you're a Wolfpack fan, there's not been a lot during the Ken Wilson tenure that has told you that this team is going to be able to play a lot better than what we've seen thus far. They started 2-0, but those 2 wins against New Mexico State, they were +5 in turnover margin. Then against Texas State, they were +4 in turnover margin. It's very difficult to lose games when you have that many turnovers, takeaways forced. Since then, 12 straight losses, which is a program record. Offensively, this team did not do much last year, 18 points per game. This year, only 20 points through 2 games. And then defensively, where we thought they were pretty strong last year in certain games, they have not been so this year. More than 1,000 yards, more than 1,100 yards allowed in its 2 games. Obviously, that's against USC and Idaho. But way too many busts, way too much lack of discipline in terms of where your eyes were. And they just gave Idaho big plays left and right. They had 7 different players on the Vandals had gains of at least 20 yards. And we know that's an explosive offense, but you have to play better defense than that. Idaho was able to move the ball up and down the field. They did have to settle for 5 field goal attempts, so there was a little bend but don't break in there. But neither the offense nor the defense played well against Idaho.
That's fair. To me, it really starts up front. The main difference usually between a group of 5 and an FCS school is line play. You have much bigger linemen, much more disruptive players on throughout your defensive line, including and Idaho did a good job. Credit to them. They their line held up with Nevada's line, which is not a good sign for Nevada. There's going to be much more talented lines that they're going to face off with in the coming weeks. So we'll see how those units kind of perform as the season goes along. But definitely, it's alarming to see that they couldn't impose their will on that lesser like level of competition. Another kind of like going back to the game. Was we talked about ball security. They were giving the ball away. AJ Bianco had that kind of like, it was a bad interception. He kind of panicked and got rid of it. And you go to Brendan Lewis, kind of staring down a guy and just his first pick. And for a guy who rarely throws picks during his time in Colorado, he threw a pick here. And either that speaks to the lack of preparation or the receivers just not getting open. What's your takeaway with that?
Yeah, I mean, Ken Wilson said it was kind of they were pressing in those moments. I think specifically in the second half when Brendan Lewis threw his interception, he was definitely pressing. He was trying to get the ball down the field because Nevada was in a hole, and they didn't maybe think they could methodically come back. They were trying to make like a 21-point play is what Coach Wilson said. There was also a fumble in the second half, so Nevada did have 3 turnovers in that game, and that's hard to come back from when you're giving the ball away. Nevada got into the red zone on 3 separate occasions. They came away with only 3 points. 1 field goal, 1 interception by AJ Bianco, and then a turnover on downs where Jamal Bell, was hit as he was trying to catch the ball right at the marker and was unable to hold on to it. So, yeah, it was kind of a disaster from start to finish. I thought Nevada did a really good job of getting a pretty solid crowd out there, almost 20,000 fans. That's the most at Mackey Stadium in the last 2 years under Coach Wilson. And unfortunately, they didn't give anything for their fans to really grab onto. I mean, we said on this podcast last week, I thought this was a must-win game for Nevada in terms of giving their fan base something to believe in, something to buy into, something to be excited for the remainder of the season. Because if you do lose, you've got back-to-back losses to FCS programs. You got 12 straight losses overall. You're getting, a defeat against a team that we said you have absolutely dominated. Nevada had won 7 straight over Idaho by an average of around 30 points per game, none of them within 16 points per game. So it is rock bottom. I mean, this is the lowest the program has been since it joined the FBS in 1992. So where does the positivity come from? At his press conference yesterday, Ken Wilson said he's a positive guy. He knew there would be some difficulties when he accepted this job. That's one of the reasons he did accept this job. I don't think he thought it would be this difficult, that they would hit this kind of a low so early in his tenure. I think everybody expected last year to be rough because of the talent that was inherited, but all of the talk leading into the season is this is a much more talented roster. So if that's the case, and I believe it to be the case, and the coaches believe it to be the case, if you're not putting a better product on the field, then ultimately it comes down to the coaching and what you're getting out of that talent. So you are only 120 minutes into a football season, but those first 120 have not given a lot of reasons to Wolfpack fans to believe that Nevada can actually go out and make substantial progress this year, which was kind of our mark. Can they get to a bowl game? Now they'd have to win 6 of the last 10 games, which looks very difficult to do. We don't even know if they can get the 3 or 4 wins, and obviously this week's game against Kansas is not going to be an easy one as a 28-point underdog.
That's definitely going to be a tough game. We'll look ahead at Kansas coming up, but that's another tough quarterback that you're facing. But kind of drawing back to just the overall outlook for the program over there. How long of a leash does he have, really? Because 12 straight losses. And Remp was brought on after he was hired. Like, how is it rare to see in-season firings, or do you think it would be something where they'd ride through the season and probably?
I don't think there's any percent chance that he gets fired in season, Ken Wilson, because his buyout in the season is $1.5 million. After the season, after December 1st, it goes down to $1 million. I don't think it'd be fair to fire him halfway through his second season. Now, if Nevada goes out there and they win 0, 1, or 2 games and they don't show progress from last year, could you see a change? Could you see that $1 million buyout paid? I think the fact that Stephanie Remp was not the athletic director who hired him, that I guess gives you a little bit more wiggle room in making a change because it doesn't look bad on you that you picked the wrong coach. I think the fact that buyout is very low, $1 million after 2 years is a pretty low number considering the contract was worth almost $5 million. that's somewhat reasonable. I know Nevada doesn't just have $1 million sitting around. I think ultimately everybody wants Ken Wilson to be successful. This guy who gave 25 years of his life as an assistant football coach and assistant athletic director to try and build Nevada up to where it's been over the last decade since he left. So it would be a very difficult decision all the way around, but ultimately you're going to be judged and you're going to keep your job or get extensions based on the product put on the field. And the product put on the field to date through 14 games under this head coach has not been good enough. Like I said, there are still some really winnable games on the schedule. They can still get to 4 or 5 wins, and it will just require a lot higher level of play. So I think if things don't change and you see, 9 losses out of the next 10 games, I think it would be hard not to make a change just because the fan base would be to the point where they wouldn't really care about the Nevada football program, and you wouldn't be able to sell season tickets. You wouldn't be able to get people excited. Now, is that completely fair given the situation Coach Wilson inherited with a strong senior class graduating, with almost 24 players leaving to go to the NCAA transfer portal after Jay Norvell took about a dozen with him to Colorado State? It wouldn't be the most fair thing in the world, but I do think that the timeline to build a winner has also shrunk because you do have the transfer portal, so you are seeing more immediate turnarounds in football. It used to take 3 or 4 years to get your roster together. Now with the transfer portal, you are seeing coaches come in and turn things around a lot quicker. Deion Sanders at Colorado is maybe not fair, but you look at G.J. Kenny at Texas State, who Nevada will play in Game 4. He added almost 60 new players, and in year 1, they were very, very strong thus far, beating Baylor in the season opener. You look at Blake Anderson at Utah State. He inherited a mess. Year 1, he wins a Mountain West championship with the Aggies. So you have been able to see these quicker turnarounds, which I think does lead to a little bit of a shorter leash for FBS coaches.
It does, and those are more, obviously the players are everything, but I think, a scheme can get you far in college football. You look at, look at the FCS ranks, when G.J. Kenny took over at Incarnate Word, they were running, like a very fast breakneck speed type of an offense that put up a lot of points. So you have to ask yourself, if you're a Nevada fan, like, where is this scheme? Where does it lie in Coach Sage's offense to really get those points? And if you're struggling to get points against the likes of Idaho, then it's going to be another season where you feel like it's zero-dimensional on the offense. So that's just things to think about. Obviously, you're not calling for this man to be fired or anything like that. We all want to see him be successful, but specifically at this level, you'd want like a coach to come in and bring a distinct vision that you could see, that leads to some success on the field. That's not to say that they aren't doing, like their jobs or anything, but it's just people have worked with less and they've gotten, more out of it. And like you said, there's more turnarounds that are happening within 1 to 2 years that are, you're seeing people become competitive. So it's, it remains to be seen. For me, my main takeaway from that, like this past weekend is, typically we're entering a political year. We always talk about, the middle class and how it's like increasingly, like just separating, going in separate ways. It feels like the haves and the have-nots in college football. Like it's the gap between there is pretty large. The middle class, your Mountain West, your MAC, all these other conferences feel like they're losing talent like early on, and the Power 5 schools are just gaining all this talent. And maybe that has to do with NIL, or maybe it just has to do, just the changing landscape with the college football.
Yeah, but we're not necessarily comparing Nevada to like the Power 5. The USC game, I think people are like, okay, you get a pass for that. That's USC. They just blew out Stanford. They're going to blow out a lot of teams. I think when you go and lose to Idaho, which is a team in the Big Sky, which, like we said, you had dominated, you had not lost to since 1999, that should not be a game where you're getting blown out. Now, if it was a close game and maybe you make a mistake down the stretch and you end up losing, that's one thing. They were completely outplayed, almost 2-1 in terms of yards gained. And like they've had a lot of winnable games thus far over the last 2 years because the bottom half of the Mountain West is not very good. You look at Hawaii, you look at Colorado State, you look at New Mexico, you look at UNLV. Those are teams that Nevada will play, and they need to be able to beat some of those teams, and they were unable to do so last year. So 0-8 in the Mountain West last year, now 12 straight losses, and we're not talking about them against Power 5 competition. Now, obviously, this week they're playing a Power 5 team in Kansas. They're a 28-point underdog. If they lose that one lopsidedly, it makes some sense. It's the losing the games to Idaho, to Incarnate Word, to a Colorado State team last year that was completely abysmal on offense. They didn't score any offensive points until the last second of the game, and you still lose that game. You give the game away against UNLV in a game that you more or less commanded, except for a couple of mistakes. I think that's when you start to get that frustration building, and I think the biggest indictment would be if they do not get better in year two. Like I said, coaches will usually get a pass in year one. You look at Nevada's history of coaches in year one; they haven't been good. Jay Norvell was 3-9. Brian Pulling was 4-8. Before that, Chris Ault was 5-7. Before that, Chris Tormey was 2-10. That's 5 straight coaches who did not get a bowl in their first year. But there was progress for all those coaches in year two. Brian Pulling got to a bowl in year two. Jay Norvell got to a bowl in year two. Chris Ault got to a bowl in year two. Chris Tormey did not. He went from 2 wins to 3 wins. And that's where he started to get that pressure. That was back in the day where you got 4 years to build a program. That's not the case necessarily anymore. We just saw Marcus Arroyo fired at UNLV, and they did increase their win total in all 3 of his seasons. So that's why there's additional pressure, and that's why there are some expectations that this team is going to end up looking better than last year's team. And again, we're only 2 games in, but I don't think you've seen that progress that is kind of required to show that you guys are heading in the right direction as a program builder.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. You just look at the roster and they've churned it over. I mean, you got the string of Pac-12 transfers. You got like their own recruiting class that they brought in. Now the younger guys will have to grow into it. And you could see like those freshmen and sophomores that are on the team, they have like some sort of promise. Like your Brown from Minogue, and you have Nate Burleson coming in as a freshman. But it's just like for any reason they can't get their upperclassmen to just produce. I mean, obviously the first game aside, the quarterbacks looked really good, and then they come down to earth against an FCS opponent. So we'll see how they perform against the likes of teams that they're supposed to compete with. But going forward this Saturday, they have a matchup against Kansas, who just came off a physical game, but a good beatdown on Illinois, who was a talented team. I think they were a bowl team last year. They had a pretty good squad. Is that Coach Beamer?
No, Lance Leopold. That's how I call him. That's not actually how you say his name. It's Lance Leipold, but it's not really spelled that way. But he was a legendary coach from the Division III ranks. So he was at Wisconsin Whitewater, won 6 national championships in 8 years. He was the fastest coach in Division I history to get to 100 wins. I think he went 103 and 6 during his time there. Then he moved over to Buffalo, really got that program running. Actually coached at Mackey Stadium his second year at Buffalo, ended up going 0-2 against Nevada, took over for Les Miles. When that job was open, Jay Norvell's name was actually kind of associated with it. They went with Coach Leipold, and he is now in year 3 there. First year was a rough one. Second year, they go 6-7, so they did make a bowl. They started off really well, got into the AP Top 25, and then kind of cratered in the second half of the season. This year, they could even maybe compete for a Big 12 championship. I think there are a lot of expectations there. They've got a really good quarterback who's a dual threat guy. They're averaging more than 550 yards per game, more than 225 rushing yards, more than 225 passing yards. So they're very multiple. They can damage you in multiple ways. And, this Nevada defense has given up more than 560 yards per game. So going to be a huge test for Nevada's defense. And then when you look at the offense, it was very disappointing against Idaho, because Idaho was known to have a really good offense, but their defense last year was not very good. So I think the thought was, okay, it's going to be a high-scoring game on both sides. It only ended up being a high-scoring game on one side. So I think your offensive coordinator, Derek Sage, he certainly is feeling some pressure to get this group going. Kansas has a pretty solid defense, so we'll see if Nevada can get going on offense. They're going to have to score a lot of points, though. I don't see how Nevada's defense holds Kansas below 30 points. So the only way this is a competitive game is if the offense is matching them, if they're getting touchdowns in the red zone, which they did not do against Idaho. They really have not sustained a touchdown drive the entire season. Their 2 big drives against USC, both result of 70-plus yard passes. And then against Idaho, they were not able to score a touchdown. So can they go 75 yards and score a touchdown? That's not something we've seen so far this season.
We talked earlier in earlier episodes about them being last year 0-dimensional. It's kind of reverting to that, you'd like to see some progress on like year in, year out. But you take away those big splash plays against USC, then all of a sudden you're looking at an offense that is sputtering out and not stringing drives together. And compound that with them having to face a good Kansas team this week, then you're going to probably see some more struggles. But yeah, like you said, they're going to have to score points against this team to keep up. Jalen Daniels is a really good quarterback. He's just a veteran guy for them. I mean, last year he started for them. Like you said, they made their way into the AP Top 25, then dropped out. But it's a good coaching job on their part to get the guys going again and kind of build up that Kansas program that was seen as probably one of, if not one of the worst teams in the FBS.
Yeah,
kind of a similar position. Where
among Power 5 schools, surely
Yeah.
It was kind of bottom of the barrel. It seemed like it was always them and Vanderbilt in some form or fashion, and they've been able to turn it around after basically a decade of winning 1 or 2 games a year. So kudos to Kansas. It shows that if you put a good coach in a tough position, they can have success. And now that's the big question for Ken Wilson is, can he get this program headed in the right direction? I mean, they've got 10 more games. I think people can oftentimes overestimate one good game or one bad game and, get maybe a little bit hyperbolic just based on what the most recent result was. And certainly for Nevada, the most recent result is not a positive one, losing to Idaho. So the Wolfpack has a chance to respond. They have a chance to show that was an anomaly, that they just played a bad game against Idaho and that they're going to be stronger moving forward. It's just, you take the 2-year sample size at this point, and there just is not a lot of proof that this team can go out there and win football games with this coaching staff and this set of players. Now, like we said, a lot of new players in the fold. 10 more opportunities to go out there and disprove what a lot of people think about this Nevada football program, and we'll see if they can take advantage of those opportunities. After this game, they go to Texas State. That's an improved team, but I wouldn't say that's not a winnable game. Then home at Fresno State, a Fresno State team that, like you said, just struggled to beat an FCS Eastern Washington. And then after that, home against UNLV, a team that's not one of the better ones in the Mountain West. So there are some opportunities. It's just kind of hard to see wins or believe that you're going to have wins based on what we've seen from this team over the first 14 games under Coach Wilson.
And we certainly could be wrong. It's there's times in college football when teams just start to click. And you hope that for Ken Wilson's sake and for Nevada football's sake that everything just starts to click and what they've been preaching works, and there's just a unifying kind of effort there that they can string out good effort on all 3 phases. I think if you look at it, like the only real performing special teams, like you look at special teams and they're really the only ones that haven't been just tripping over their feet. So the defense needs to it should have been the strong point coming in. So far look, it's a small sample size, and USC definitely inflates it. But you look at it, it's like around 49 points a game allowed. We were talking about them needing to allow 26 points a game to really be competitive. So they got their work cut out for them. Again, USC doesn't inflate that, but you'd like to see them string out an effort that all 3 phases of the game are just working together.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to last year, I think the game where Nevada played the best during this 12-game losing streak was at San Jose State. They were like 24-point underdogs, and they really had that game in hand for a lot of the contest. They ended up losing by 7. Tyson Williams, unfortunately for himself, dropped the interception that could have, kind of helped seal the game. So there was that one spike where they kind of played above the level everyone was expecting. And I don't think anybody is saying, this is what's going to happen in the future. All I'm giving analysis is this is what we've seen thus far. And what we've seen thus far is not a team that's, like you said, gelled, that's played well in all 3 phases together, that's been able to go against better competition. And even against the lighter competition, they've just struggled to close out games and to make winning plays when winning plays needed to be made. You look at Colorado State, you look at UNLV last year, you look at San Jose State last year. Now, there were some games where they were just straight up blown out because the competition talent level was so much higher, last year against Air Force, Boise State, Fresno State. Those are more well-established programs, but not even be able to get wins against the lower level programs, I think is made this team, in Coach Wilson's words, a little bit fragile in certain situations and a little bit slow to react to adversity when it happens in games. So until you go out there and you win a football game together, I think it's hard to have that belief that you can go and do it, that you can overcome mistakes and go out there and make winning plays when winning plays are required. So I think everyone is waiting for that to happen before you can truly believe that it's going to happen on a regular basis. And I think the team itself needs a moment like that where they do come together and that they do win a game and that they do have reason to celebrate, to really have a belief in everything that's going on, because you can do it in practice, but until you do it in the game with everybody watching, with the pressure on, it's kind of hard to have that belief that you can rise up and make winning plays to go out there and walk off the field victorious.
Certainly, and we'll see come Saturday. I mean, it's a late night game, 7:30 p.m. Kansas is coming in. They're going to stay an extra night in Reno to kind of like, combat any travel fatigue that
they're already
facing.
complaining about
they're
that,
complaining.
right?
I'm like, hey, enjoy it, man. You're going to stay in the circus, enjoy it.
So are they staying at the circus? Do you know that? We'll have to go check. The reason that they're complaining, though, is because they're staying overnight on Sunday. That is actually considered a non-off day, and their off day traditionally is Sunday. So they're not going to be able to practice Monday for their next game. So they're going to fly back Sunday, and they're going to have to practice as soon as they land. So the NCAA has a bunch of dumb rules, but there's a limited amount of practice time you're allowed in a week, and that Sunday will now count as one of their practice days, even though the plan was basically just to sleep here, because the game's probably not going to get over until like 11 o'clock, and they probably wouldn't get out of here until 1 o'clock. So if they flew back with the time change, probably wouldn't get home until like 7 a.m. So Lance Leopold, who did bring his Buffalo team here, which is an even further travel, did voice some displeasure with the NCAA. I know Kansas is going to be down 2 key players on defense in the first half because they were ejected for targeting in the second half of that Illinois game. So maybe those things, help Nevada's favor. But the Wolfpack is certainly going to have to rise up. And you don't want to say, hey, if you keep it within single digits, it's a win for Nevada. But I do feel like it's kind of that game. Now, a win would be huge in telling the fan base, like, hey, you've got us wrong. We can actually go out there and win games. But Nevada's never won a game since 2000, the latest numbers I have, where it's a 20-plus point underdog. They're now 0-31 in those situations. So it would take pretty much a miracle victory to go out there and win. The biggest underdog spread Nevada's ever been in a game it's won outright, 17 points at Washington in 2003, and then at San Diego State in 2019. So it would definitely be a historic effort.